welcome to Igniting Change. It's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Oh, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you very much.
You want to introduce yourself, so tell us who you are, what you do, and what organization you're with.
Yeah, so I'm with Alex's Lemonade Stand here in the U.S. We're a pediatric childhood cancer charity. We started in 2005. The foundation was funded, but it really started earlier than that in 2000 with our founder, Alex Scott, who had pediatric cancer, and at 4 started holding lemonade stands to basically help raise money for her doctors. And so her first stand raised $2,000 in a day when she was 4. Liz, her mom, tells a great story of, well, you want to have a lemonade stand? She said, you want to have a lemonade stand? Why do you want to have one? You know, they have a lot going on, right? You have a child with cancer, you have other young siblings. And she said, what do you want to buy? Because we'll just get it for you. And Alex was like, I don't want to buy anything. I just want to give something to my doctors who are helping me. And she's 4 years old. So it's pretty incredible. And she continued to hold these stands. It went viral before viral was a thing. She ended up being on Oprah, on the Today Show. And by the time she was 8 in 2004, when, sadly she passed away from neuroblastoma, she'd raised $1 million. So kids heard about it. Kids started having their own lemonade stands. There were lemonade stands in all 50 states. Like I said, she went on Oprah. She mentioned her goal of $1 million. She said, I think if everybody holds a stand, we could do it. And it happened. And so, a year later, people, were coming to Liz and Jay, our, also co-founders, and her parents, saying, well, what are you going to do with this thing? And they felt like, well, we have to keep it going. And so they quit their jobs and started the foundation. So since then, we've raised over $250 million. We've funded over 1,000 projects at 150 different institutions. And we not only fund research, but we provide services for families as well, because our founders, they've lived this journey. They know what these families are going through. So they know, for example, because they were in Connecticut at first, that sometimes the treatment isn't nearby. So they would have to travel here to Philadelphia, where we are, for the treatment that she would get. And so we have a program called Travel for Care, where for some families who qualify, we will help them with their travel and their expenses if they have to travel long distances. We offer services for siblings called Super Sibs. I just happened to be there. That wasn't a purpose. We have called Super Sibs, where, there's so much focus on the child who is sick that sometimes, the siblings can maybe get a little lost in the shuffle. And so we'll send them mailings that are age appropriate and send them birthday cards. And, that's just an example. But we have several programs that are, kind of support for families, as well as simply funding research. So that's Alex's.
Which absolutely incredible. But what do you do for Alex?
Yes. What do I do? So I'm on the communications team, and I mostly do digital marketing. I have at times, I've been here for about 5 years, a little bit over 5 years. So I've had various roles. I've overseen social, I've overseen online video, and now I'm focused on new opportunities. So, figuring out what are some new audiences that we can go after. What are areas where we can grow a program or come up with a new campaign, and really focusing on growth beyond the things that we already do and do well to raise funds. So it's exciting.
Yeah, I was going to say, you get to look at all the new shiny things, all those shiny opportunities, which, it sounds exciting. It sounds very glamorous, but also, I guess for a lot of organizations, a lot of foundations, there's risk associated with that, because you don't know what works or what's likely to work. So you're going to have to be brave, put big boy pants on and be like, right, we're going to have to try some stuff here, an experiment maybe.
For sure. I mean, look, luckily I'm a digital marketer, by trade, right? So the idea of testing things and trying them out and knowing that a large percentage or some percentage will fail, I'm going into it with that mindset. So,
which is brilliant, and you make it sound so easy to have that mindset, but I think that can be around the culture. It sounds like the culture, Alex,
Yes.
is brilliant, and it's very nurturing, and they allow you this space to breathe and to test different things. And sometimes I think, certainly in the conversations I've had off the record with people struggle with that because they don't always have that. There's not always that supportive culture around them. And I think to hear you just talk about it so openly is brilliant. It's really refreshing. More people need to do this, but I understand it's hard, especially in not-for-profit organizations or foundations. I think it is almost harder because you've got donor dollars and you've got other you just got other factors which make it probably a more high pressure environment, maybe.
Well, look, we're very serious about these funds are coming from people who sometimes they've paid all their bills for the month and they have a little bit left over and they're sending us a check. And so we have to be very responsible with that. We do look for a return on the things that we try. We're obviously very careful with things, but at the same time, the culture, I'll tell you, the culture here is more open to trying new things than most of the for-profit organizations I've worked for, if not all of them.
What? That's amazing. Yeah. So you were in the for-profit space before, and then you kind of switched over to Alex's. Talk to me about that journey.
Sure. Yeah, so I've kind of bounced back and forth. So, coming out of school, I majored in political science, which I think I thought meant that it trained me to work on political campaigns, but it turns out that it actually doesn't. It just trains you to be a social scientist. But still, I went out and started working on political campaigns, and I worked as a political consultant for about 10 years, both on candidate campaigns, advocacy campaigns, sometimes on an actual campaign, other times for agencies or consulting firms. And even though I didn't realize it was going to be a key part of the journey at the time, there were a lot of opportunities to use technology for good along the way. So, in 1998, I managed a campaign in San Jose, California, which is in Silicon Valley. It was for mayor of San Jose. A big part of our message was that our candidate, had worked at HP, and we wanted to show that he was technologically savvy, right? Because it's, again, Silicon Valley. So, we put up a website, which it sounds like, so what? But 1998, not everybody had a website. But the other thing we did is we took donations online, which nobody was doing then. Now, I don't know that I want to tell you how we did it because, the security protocols, there weren't any yet. So it was kind of, we got the number, we ran it on a credit card machine in the office. But the user experience was such that they were giving online, and that was a big, and that was a big kind of game changer.
1998, you say?
1998, yeah.
Wow. And do you know what? Yeah. You're not going to be alone. There would have been other people doing similar things, but in the minority. But it's really brave to be trying something like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound that long ago, but it is. It's what, 2023 today? Oh my gosh.
Lots changed.
Yeah.
Lots changed. So, yeah. So I did that for a while. I also worked for an agency where we started doing websites, but then expanded to providing tools. So to advocacy groups where we made it easy for people to say, write their senator, email their senator by just, with one click responding to an email, it would generate a fax. Again, doesn't sound like a big deal now, but in the late 90s, it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Gamified it so that the more actions you took, you get points, you could get swag. A lot of things where we were trying to get technology out to make a difference. Number one, because by the way, it's a common misconception. People ask, "Oh, do you work for both parties? Do you work?" Of course not. Nobody in that space does. So we were only working for organizations with causes we believed in, right? So we also provided tools for Planned Parenthood was a client. So they have a lot of local offices. So we provided them tools with it was basically you could skin a local version of your website for a local piece. And then there was a CRM that, kind of
content
connected all of them together.
Amazing.
Again, 2000, that was kind of a big deal. So anyway, so left that, went, great. Politics is very, It's very exciting. Obviously, I felt like I was making a difference. Also, not a great lifestyle when you're starting to raise a family.
Yeah.
so I went back to business school and went into the for-profit world, and somehow stumbled on technology again. So I got involved with Yellow Book USA, which used to be owned by Yelp
Yeah.
in the UK, and was working on the new media product development team where we were developing digital products for advertisers. So what is our pay-per-click product? What is our website product, et cetera. And then since, between now and then and now, various roles, mostly in the for-profit space, different tech solutions, some startups, did a lot of kind of freelance work. And, along the way, you could only tell the story that solution X, platform X, is going to make it easier for you to run your business because it's saving you time. I felt like I was telling that story everywhere I went. And it wasn't, again, like it was making a difference for their business, but maybe not for the world. At the time, I got invited to join the board of a local nonprofit called Greensgrow, which is an urban farm in Philadelphia.
Wow.
And so getting back around, my people, who cared about these things, that was refreshing, and it made me, realize that I missed it. Then things started ginning up around here in the 2016 election. And obviously, I still followed politics and campaigns, and felt like, I mean, it's going to sound really corny, but I felt like, in the future, my kids are going to ask me, what did I do? What did I do when this was going on? And so I wanted to do stuff. So I started to volunteer for organizations, to increase voter participation, et cetera, things like that, and work on other issues that I was concerned with. And then realized I wanted to get back to spending all of my time making a difference. And, just kept my eyes open for opportunities. And actually, one thing I like to tell people is, if you apply somewhere and you don't get the job, don't close the door on it. Right. So when I first applied to Alex's, I got a very nice email from the HR person that said, hey, look, you're a little too senior for what we're looking for. I said, fine, no problem. Then another opening came up, and I applied for that, did my application online, but then I still had the email that the HR person had sent me. And luckily she was still there. So you always have to have a little bit of luck. But I replied to that email from 2 or 3 years before. And I said, hey, remember me? I just applied for this one. It looks like it's a little more senior. I'm still interested in the organization. And obviously, that resonated with them because, what people should know is that obviously nonprofits want people with nonprofit experience. That's one thing. If you're trying to make that transition, it's challenging, right? Because you don't have, quote unquote, that experience. But we also really want to see that you're committed and passionate about our mission, right? And so the fact that I had applied and also donated a car that died long before I applied, even the first time, and then kind of contacted them again. I think that got their attention, and then I was able to get through the process. So here I am.
That's a really good piece of insight. We see the same with people applying at Cube, and we always say, if you're not successful the first time, don't give up. Like, there will be other opportunities that you might be better suited to, or, you might have got a little bit more experience down the line and come back to us. So that's a wonderful, I guess it's a piece of advice, isn't it? Be tenacious, don't give up, like, be passionate and keep going. So, right. So you've been at Alex's over 5 years now, and you touched on various different roles. Talk to me about an example of like tech for good within Alex's, or how you guys use technology to have a positive impact.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of things. I mean, we obviously incorporated I was a digital marketing team for a while. We incorporated digital marketing. We do things like, I mean, these are kind of table stakes, but still, we do A/B testing, we do cross-channel promotions, but we also take a look at. So I got two for you, by the way. So, this is the first one. Okay. So we also take a look at, which they did this before I got here, but it goes back to my product development days of, making the build or buy decision.
Okay.
Right. So you decide you want, say, to do peer-to-peer fundraising. So you need a system that allows people to create a fundraising page and take donations. Well, do we go to a vendor or do we build it ourselves? Right. And so, with Alex's, there's been I think a recognition that a lot of this stuff is not just adoption, but it's investment. Right. So we have an in-house developer in addition to our external developer. Outside of this space, we have, we started doing online video. Well, now we have a full-time videographer and a part-time videographer. We've grown our social media team, from 1 to 2 full-time people, plus the communications team supports it. So it's not just saying like, okay, we're going to adopt it, but we're really going to put some chips on it. And so in the case of we've basically built our own platform for personal fundraising pages and processing donations, and have been able to kind of add bells and whistles to it that everybody has, but some of them, we may have had, earlier, like, putting a badge when you get, reach a certain, number of donations or whatever.
That autonomy, that ownership allows you to create your custom roadmap for the product, right? So you get to decide, what features, what functionality is it adds most value to your donors, to your supporters, which is an incredible position to be in. And I guess, you raise a really good point, because it's not just about adoption. And I think that's important. And sometimes people might decide to adopt something, they can learn some valuable lessons, but actually that second piece in terms of investment is super important. And I would love to know, absolutely love to know. There's no survey that exists, and I have been saying it for years. In fact, I had a conversation with Michael, CEO of Charity Navigator, on a previous recording around this. But it's the investment that not-for-profits and foundations make into technology. Like, I'm really curious to know who is actually investing in this space versus just adopting. And I think adopting is also investing to some extent.
Yeah, of course.
Like, doing it yourselves is a very brave and bold thing to do, but also it's obviously paid off because you're continuing to do it. And it sounds like you do this in other aspects of the foundation as well, which is exciting to hear.
Yeah, we do. And sometimes we don't, right? So, like our marketing automation platform, that's something that, like, we're not going to build that. We're not going to be able to give it the care and feeding that, HubSpot can or Salesforce can.
You don't want to rebuild HubSpot or Salesforce.
No, there's no way, right? So we don't do it all the time, but sometimes we do. And so one of the things that we launched a few years ago as a foundation, we call it the Childhood Cancer Data Lab. And the problem that it's trying to solve is that there are data sets out there with lots and lots of data about either research studies or actual clinical care information on, in this case, pediatric cancer research, but all kinds of things, other cancer research, that the data is not standardized, right? So if I'm a researcher and I know that, like, you, Puff, you did this, amazing thing with the zebrafish where you tested this, that, or the other, and I want access to that data, I may not be able to, put it into my system, right, and massage it. So the CCDL is trying to solve that problem, to standardize data across these data sets, which are very, very large and very powerful. And you get machine learning into these data sets, and you could really start to pull out some insights that, would be really hard for somebody to do, manually. And so we're doing that. We're doing a few other things technologically with data, and also then training people how to use these tools once they've been created. And it's super exciting.
It's hugely exciting. And there are so many organizations doing this right now. In fact, I was only the other day speaking to Seema from the Hive. So that's essentially like the data lab for USA for UNHCR. And the amount of data that they have and trying to well, it's they're using machine learning to just try and basically understand that data better and process the data sets. But it's such a growing area. I always find it very overwhelming, like, because I always say it's like death by data. It's like, well, what do you need to know? What insights do you need? And what's going to be helpful? Because otherwise it just feels very overwhelming with the amount of data that there actually is. Oh my gosh. So how long has that lab been like going? Do you know?
I think it was established right before I got here. So, a little bit, just over 5 years.
So you guys are very forward thinking, because there's a lot of people only recently doing this. So actually you've kind of got a head start in terms of really understanding the data and being able to use that data for the right reasons and right purposes.
Yeah. I mean, every now and then, sure, we're ahead of the curve. Not always, but every now and then.
So, like, going back to that, like the first example, and you guys building that product yourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Building a product, as you know, is not a straightforward, easy process. Are there any learnings or insights that you can share, or I don't know, like anything that you can share around that process would be incredible to know.
I mean, well, I wasn't here when it was, initially built, but as we continue to add to it, I mean, I think the biggest thing is planning for scale, right? Is planning for scale and planning for, planning for kind of like a modular approach, right? So that you can bolt something new on without having to get in under the hood and rebuild the engine. And so sometimes that's, we can build an API into NetSuite, which we use for our CRM. And so that's pretty seamless, right? When somebody makes a donation online. But there are other things you try and bolt on that don't work as easily. So, planning for that is one. Those are the main things I would say: scalability and planning for like new functionality so that it's possible and it's not, you don't get it to a point where it's done.
Yeah.
You have to know that it's never done.
Well, and that's so true, because you're always continuously improving it, right? So, and we say this for any of the projects that we get to work on, and for anyone thinking about undertaking this kind of investment into a technical solution, I always use the analogy of either like having a child or getting a pet. Like if you were to get a dog, you have to nurture it, you have to keep it alive, you have to keep feeding and nurturing this living, breathing creature, because that's ultimately what it is. And especially now, people's expectations around technology, whether it's a website, whether it's an app, whether it's a platform, like whatever it is, you start small, right? And you see what's working and you just try and get something out there quickly to test that works, and that, it does what it needs to do, and it does that very well. And the more simple, the better, certainly in our experience.
Sure.
And then you scale, right? You start building on that and you nurture that, but you never really stop still. Like, yes, you can evaluate and you can review what's happening and you can see the insights and the data and you can speak to users about the experience, but it's never finished, like, because there will always be something. And thanks to like, let's say if it was a mobile app, I always say sometimes we're at the mercy of Apple or Google, when they push out the new OS updates, like the big ones once a year. And they have become better with comms, i.e. there's the developer conference earlier in the year. So then we have some kind of understanding of like what's coming. But even then, from the point of them talking to the world about what's coming to the actual point of release, stuff changes inevitably, because there's been a few months that have passed. But you just kind of never know, and you're always learning, and you have to be okay with that. And I don't think it's for everyone. Some people struggle with that. And I think, to be honest with you, I probably did back in the very early days. I was like, oh, but I like to, when I'm done, I like to like finish something and, feel like I can close the book. Well, you can't really do that with, tech or software design or
Right.
development. So there'll always be improvements. There'll always be something changing because the technical landscape is changing so fast. So
Well, there's an analog saying that I think of. I think it was Hemingway. If not, I'm sure there'll be somebody in the comments or something who said a novel is never completed; it's abandoned. So it's pretty much the same thing.
yeah,
That's where we are with technology.
it really is. And we see that. We see so many examples of that. And I think that's something I do get frustrated by, because when people take on projects, and I can't say this enough, like, you have to really think and understand what you're taking on here, because it isn't a one-off investment that you're undertaking. It is something that is going to be continuous.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know what it is. It's naivety maybe for those people that do take on something and then realize halfway through, oh, actually, yeah, like, this is never gonna be done.
Right. Well, and it's not just nonprofits or organizations at our size. I mean, we run into it when we partner with large organizations. So not to pick on Venmo, for example, but so Venmo, first of all, it took them forever to launch a solution for nonprofits. And when they did, I'm not sure, how much they actually talked to the marketplace. And so, so we use Venmo now, and we just had Lemonade Days, which is our big. I mean, people hold lemonade stands across the country to raise money for Alex's all year. But we put a big push during this time frame of in early June called Lemonade Days, because that's when, among other things, Alex had her first stand, and it's also coincides with towards the end of the school year. It's a good time. It's the beginning of summer. So this is the first year Venmo was available, and I don't know that they stress tested it. I think they must have assumed that, oh, well, somebody's going to get maybe a couple of donations a day and on their website, and it'll be fine. And so, well, no, we got 1,500 in 11 days. And we can't get reports generated. We have to go to their customer support to have them manually generate a report. So it's fine, but it's it's one of these things. It's not just a nonprofit or a smaller organization that sometimes doesn't, plan for kind of like the way the market's going to change or the space is going to change. It's everybody. So,
and ultimately, whilst it is a challenge, it's a good challenge to have, and that's a good problem to have, and that you can solve together. But just going back to your point of, when you're designing a solution and building it, you always have to go back to those users, the people that are actually going to be use it. If you do not get the insight and you have those conversations with the users, ultimately the solution that you're building won't be as good as it probably needs to be. I think that's just, it's wonderful that you've highlighted. I mean, Venmo's huge, right? And but it happens. Like we see it happen with Amazon, with Google, with like all the big tech giants out there.
Mm-hmm.
But no one really talks about that stuff, because you can't. I don't know. My perception is people put these tech brands on a pedestal, like they don't get anything wrong in terms of the design or the development, but actually they do. They're always continuously evolving, and then they're doing stuff. But that example with Venmo is a really interesting one. But you're taking it with such a positive attitude of, okay, well, we'll get there. It's just taking time to work through it.
I mean, the important thing, right, is that we have the funds and we'll be able to make them available. So that's the important thing. But, it's just such a great point about putting these folks on a pedestal, because, once you start dealing with them, especially when you're dealing with them as a nonprofit, you realize how, I'll put this politely, how very little resources they've invested in understanding the nonprofit space. And so there are a lot of unique challenges that we have, that they roll out these products and they think that that they're ready to go, and they don't think about, well, how are you going to handle recurring donations? How are you going to handle this, that, or the other? And it's happened with all the tech giants. Every time we'll get Facebook will say, hey, we're rolling this thing out. Do you want to test it? Do you want to be part of our group? And we'll test it. And because that's our culture. We like to try these new things. And then we'll see, then I'll send them a list of, suggestions at the end of the test. And it's usually pretty long. And they're not used to having somebody on this side who is in product development. So, but they're usually quite appreciative, though. Because they know that they don't.
So they should be, because ultimately you're helping them. That feedback is going to help them improve and get better. But I do find it fascinating that they don't invest, and a lot of them do invest an incredible amount of, time, energy, money, effort. But like, if you're going to do it well. Like, just take the time to have the conversations. And I get it. Sometimes when you're having to involve stakeholders, it takes longer, and trying to align everyone, like it's hard. It isn't an easy process, but most of the time it's worthwhile trying to get to that right solution. But it's amazing that I bet you they really do appreciate all the feedback, and you're probably doing it in a way that actually is that they totally get, and they're like, yes, this is good. Do you
Oh yeah, it's very collaborative. It's not antagonistic.
So, Jamil, tell me, are there any other examples out there? In fact, actually, before I do that, when you were talking about your experience in politics earlier, I meant to say to you, have you heard of an app called My Balbo?
No, I have not.
Right. Okay. So post this podcast, go and check it out. So these guys, Celeste and her brother Jonathan, have created and I know I'm going down a bit of a rabbit hole now. They've created an app that essentially empowers the next generation of change makers, voters, to be more up to speed with what's happening in politics, and to have a safe space to be able to talk about politics. So it's an app. There are round tables that you can have with people to talk about specific topics, specific people, and specific agendas. It's an amazing platform, and I've only recently come across it, so that's the only reason I flag it. And I feel like you would be quite interested in that, so I just wanted to share that before going on to the next part. So, are there any other examples of tech for good that have inspired you along your journey? Because I feel like you've touched on lots of different areas in your career. It's quite varied.
Yeah, it's been all over the place. But actually, it's funny you brought up that example, because one of the things that I look at now is I sometimes look to the political space, because they are starting to. It used to be, again, early 2000s, mid 2010s. Politics was kind of behind tech, or at least political campaigns, anyways. And now they're pretty cutting edge in many ways. So even some things like just watching what political campaigns have done with SMS and texting. And I know that I live in a swing state. I live in Pennsylvania, so we get hit with all the ads, we get hit with everything, and I and all of my friends, we complain about the texts we get at the end of a campaign because we're in Pennsylvania. But at the same time, what they've done with that, I think, has been really impressive. And, it's something that we, and I know other folks I talk to in the space, are very hesitant to do, because, you kind of take that focus group of one approach. Yeah. Oh, I hate those texts. Everybody hates those texts. No, we're not going to do that. But you can't approach it that way, because, and by the way, I'm totally guilty of this too. I'm hesitant to start sending text also. But we are dipping our toe in using text to communicate with people who are doing fundraisers for us, right? And one of the reasons why is, I'll just bring an example from my life. I have a daughter who's 17. If I forward her an email or send her an email, I have to text her and tell her to check her email, because there's a generation that never checks their email. Yeah. So, you've got to look at where people are and how you're going to communicate with them. So that's one piece. And I think another thing that they're doing really well is micro-targeting, in terms of, not just interests and other things that maybe we have access to. But like in the old days when I was out there canvassing, you had a clipboard and you had, you're writing it on a pen.
That still
and
exists. People they're still using that.
they do still do that, but the campaigns that have more resources are out there with digital tools and tablets, and so they're able to capture that data on a household by household basis and then talk to people specifically about what they're interested in. And just to bring it back to, for example, we have this event Million Mile, which was a virtual event before virtual events were cool. We've been doing it for years, where in the month of September, folks are both raising money and teams are raising money, but they're also logging their miles. So it's like, well, how far will you go, right, to help children with cancer? And so, we run Facebook ads for people who are active in all different types of ways, right? Like cycling, hiking, just walking. But then being able then to connect when you retarget those folks. Yeah. Are you retargeting them with a cycling ad, or are you just lumping in all of your registrants from last year and then sending them all the same thing? So, those are the things that we need to be thinking about. And I think that the political campaigns with a lot of resources are doing that, in a way that's very intelligent and really interesting to me.
And I think that there's a theme there of just being super, super targeted. So I was having a conversation the other day about so UNHCR have an app called Connecting Worlds. What that app does, in fact, they've got two. Let me start with the first one. So the first one connects donors directly with refugees that are benefiting from the donor dollars, and it allows this app allows for two-way communication. Obviously, there's a high level that there's lots of moderation.
Sure.
There's lots of safeguarding issues that have been taken into consideration, but it's in what I would describe as beta right now. I think they're testing it out in Australia, I want to say, and there'll be other markets that it will roll out to. But
that's incredible. I mean, talk about being able to see your impact. It's incredible.
It's an awesome way of surfacing that impact, and I think that's the way that the future's going, because this is what people are expecting. When you're talking about your daughter and not using email, you've got to text her. Everything's just so instant now. That's what people are expecting. And if you're bringing a mobile into the mix, people expect that high level of tailoring. They expect it to be personal. This is where it's going. And then I think what they've done, and this is a wonderful example of a not-for-profit organization that have essentially repurposed the technology that they've invested in. So they've built that, and we were very lucky to be able to do that with them. But we've basically repurposed that so that they can then connect refugees with mentors to help them acclimatize to their new life in a different country. So there's two things there. There's that theme that you're talking about in terms of being highly tailored, highly focused, highly targeted. And then there's another interesting piece that kind of just building on that is just reusing technology that already exists. And I think what we're going to be seeing more and more of in the not-for-profit space, if foundations like yourselves are investing in your own platforms and your own technology, it's thinking, okay, that's brilliant, but can you either white label that as a product to other foundations or other organizations, or can you repurpose that platform to serve another need within the organization? Could it help you do something else? It may not. But I'm definitely seeing organizations, like World Resources Institute are doing something very similar. I think they call it sustainable tech, thinking about how you might use technology differently within your organization and how you can be efficient and effective. If you've built a piece of functionality, can it be repurposed or reused for something else? And one of the common themes that always comes up is basically it's like a matching piece of technology, whether you're matching a donor with a project, or whether you're matching a volunteer with a project. It's still the same piece of technology. It's just being purposed for slightly different things. So yes,
that's really cool.
Well, look, Jamil, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. It's been fascinating.
No,
And
my pleasure. It was great.
it's been really, really fun. So thank you. Have a wonderful Friday. And yeah, I'm sure I'll be in touch to see how everything's going your end.
Excellent. I look forward to it.